Hi and welcome back to the next video of the real-time setup. So you can see it here. Here everything is about setting up the NestJS and Angular parts. So we make like a Docker file for our NestJS and also a Docker file for our Angular stuff. We make a Docker compose file that brings everything together, so we can start with one simple command. And then we make sure that we can access our API with Angular, so that we can connect, or that we link our Angular service to our NestJS service so that we are able to communicate and get some data. And we also have like a Postgres database that we can access from NestJS. So everything is like ready that we can now in the next videos start with really developing the chat application itself. So as always, we have like a little structure. So first we will have a look at the video outcome so that you can see what we are going to build. Then we read the user story for this outcome, and then we implement everything and we close the user story or check it before and then close it. So let's have a quick look at the outcome of this video here. So you can see here we start everything with Docker Compose up. We have a running NestJS API, we have our Postgres database, we have Postgres adminer, we have our front end running, and we have our API with NestJS here running and connecting. And you can see it here, our API is returning in our controller simple hello YouTube from our app service here, so accessed by this. And then we access this here in our front end via a service. We have like a proxy conf set up, so we can just get from our API. This here is getting rerouted inside our Docker from our proxy from Angular to our API service, and then it returns the value. So you can see here, if we go into our browser and we hit localhost 4200 for Angular, we are displaying hello, which is coming from our HTML here. And you can see the test value where this is what we get from our backend, and we load it with the async pipe. We subscribe to the observable, and then we display the title that we return from our backend. So this is what we basically do in this video. So we have our NestJS and our Angular set up basically, both with a Docker file, and then we have a Docker compose file that brings everything together so we can run it later with a simple command. So let's have a look at our first story. So you can see our overall topic of the series is the real-time chat application with NestJS and Angular. And here we are in our first video. So what you need obviously is Angular, NestJS, npm, Docker on your computer. And always make sure that you have like the latest versions of Angular and NestJS. So you can check this very easily by running nest --version in your terminal and ng --version. Also, and then you can see that I'm in NestJS 7.6 and Angular 12. And if you go to npm, these are like the latest versions that are published here. So for Angular it's 12, for NestJS it's 7.6. Otherwise, you can just copy this command here, insert it and make it globally installed, and then you can use it from everywhere. So now let's have a look in the story for this video here. So the story is, as a developer, I want the NestJS backend and the Angular frontend to be set up. Both should be run or runnable with a Docker file. They should be run and started together via a Docker compose file so that we can start everything with one single command, usually Docker compose up. And the NestJS backend should connect to our Postgres database that we also start within the Docker compose file. And at the end of this video, the frontend should be able to retrieve like a basic value from our backend. So just access the API, get a value, and display it in the view to the user, for example. And of course, the communication between Angular and the NestJS backend is happening all inside Docker. Then we have our acceptance criteria that we can check at the end if these are all fulfilled. So we want to set up Angular, we want to set up, of course, NestJS. We want to start Angular with a Docker compose and Docker file and access it in our browser, for example, on localhost 4200, the basic Angular port. We want to start NestJS with Docker compose and get a basic value at this endpoint here, so a localhost 3000/API. NestJS should connect to a Postgres database that we set up with Docker compose. So where we can just use an image from the Docker Hub to run with the database, and then we enter some values like the user and the password so that we can access it via Nest.js. And of course, Angular should display like a value that it gets from the Nest.js backend. And here it happens container to container communication. So Angular then gets this value from our Nest.js backend and displays it in the view. So the first thing that we want to do is, so that we see here, I am already inside my Git repository that I set up with GitHub. And now the first thing that I want to do is I want to set up Nest.js, and I want to set up Angular. So we can close this file here. And since I'm already inside my folder, I can just say nest new, and so I make a new Nest project here. And I want to call this project API. So this will generate like a new Nest.js template for me. So I want to use npm as a package manager, and then this will install everything that I probably need. And then you can see we already have here our API folder, and we have the basic Nest.js structure. So you can see we have our source folder that has a basic main function here. We have a basic app service that just returns hello world. We have app.module where we have registered our app controller and our app service. And we have also here our app controller that is registered in our module. And so, for example, here we have our get endpoint, and then this should return the string from our app service get hello. So in our service, we are returning hello world. So when this is finished, then this here should also go away. So it just needs to install everything. So let's wait a bit. And we can already have a look inside our package.json. And here we can see we have all our Nest.js commands. For example, prebuild, build, start def, so that if you change something in your files, it what it is with NodeMon, I think, and then it recompiles, and so you can very fast develop something, or you can debug it. You can start with prod, so it just runs when your main file here, your main JS file or TS file. And you see it here. Now we have our node modules folder, and it's installing all the stuff that we have installed here. And here in our package.json, we also have our our dependencies. For example, AXJS. We have the NestJS packages. We have dev dependencies and so on. And so now we have to wait. And while we wait, we can already open like another terminal, and we can, since we are also in this folder, make also a new Angular project, and we can just, here you can see they are very related. So the command was nest new and then the project name, and here we also have ng new and the project name. So we can call this, for example, Frontend. And then this should also ask us some stuff. Here we want to use Angular routing. We want to use SCSS, and then it's installing already all our packages that we need here, and we have our front-end folder that is being set up for us. You can see it here. Now we are here in our Nest.js installation, and this is already finished. So we can clear this here while Angular is still installing everything, and we can start with our API. So we can cd into our API folder, and we can just look inside our files. For example, if everything is here, so this seems good. So we can, for example, say npm run start dev. So here we say we want to npm run the start with the goal dev, and this is here specified in package.json. So we run npm run start, where is it? Dev. And so this is already also recompiling if we change something. So we can just hit enter. And then you see it starts Nest and watches for file changes inside this folder here. And so let's give it a minute. And then you can see we are starting in watch mode. And this will, normally it goes faster, but since I'm installing 2 times and already also have my video here running, this takes a bit. And then we should be able to access this via our browser. So we could go for localhost 3000 and then should be able to get from our controller here our hello world stuff. So you can see it started everything. We have our app controller. And we have mapped a get route. So basically, if I go to localhost 3000, you see hello world returned. You could also do this with Postman, but since it's a simple get request, our browser here is enough to display this. So at the moment we have NestJS up and running, and now we want to make a Docker file. Make this also running. So we are here in our API folder. We want to make a Docker file. And then we have to start. Here we, for example, first need to specify like a node version that we want to build our container from. So then choose an image for this. So for example, when we make some comments, we can say specify node version and image. And so we can say we want to choose from a base image, and the base image should be node. And here we can use, for example, 14, or maybe if you have installed right extensions, you can also choose here. So at the moment, I think 14 is good. And then we could, for example, name this so that we could later access this stage here. So we have here like a multi-pipeline stage build. We could access everything after this keyword as stage here with the keyword stage. So we could say this development. And so we can add this here also as a comment and say name image development. And this can be anything. And I already have like another video where I just set up NestJS with this Docker file with Docker Compose and connect it to a database. So if you're more interested in this, you can also go to the second video, but we will also cover everything from this video here in this. Then we want to specify like a working directory. This can also be anything because this is like inside our container. So we can say this is like my name, Thomas. We're in source, we're in app folder. So we can like make a comment here, specify working directory inside container. And then we want to copy our package JSON. And when we say use here, like I think it's asterisk in English. So then this will choose, or the wildcard, this will both copy the package JSON and the package log JSON. So we can use this. And then we copy this because we have here our empty. So you see it here, we copy from our source, so from here inside, so from our package JSON to our destination. The destination is our current directory inside our Docker container. So we make another comment here and say copy package log.json and package.json from host to inside container working directory. So we copy this here from our host machine, so from my computer into my Docker container to this path because we are here in the working directory at the moment. Then we can install all the dependencies. And so we run this command inside our Docker container where we are in the working directory, so in our source app. And here we have already copied our package.json. So now we can install everything. So we can just run npm install. So we can say install deps inside container. Then we can say we copy and bundle all our sources. This and then we can just build our application to our dist folder. So we can say in run npm run build, and we want to expose our port 3000. And then this here is like our development stage. And then we can make here like another stage that we can name production. I'll just make a comment so that it's clear that these are separated. And like I said, if you want to know more about this, there's a second video. So here we build another image that is named production, so that we can then later easily start this also. We again have Node with version 14, and now we call it production. Then we can set our node env to production. And set this also to our node env. Then we can set, or we have to set our working directory, set work dir, and this can also be our Thomas source app. And then we don't have to npm install everything, but we could, for example, copy everything, copy, and then we say from, and then we name it here our stage development that we named here. And from this, we can go to Thomas source app dot. And then if we run it, for example, on port 8080 in production, we can expose this. And then we can run this with run app, like the same that is here in the package.json for production. So node dist main. So we just say we want to cmd. And then we say we want to run node and then dist main. So we could now Docker here. Or let's do it later with a Docker compose and see if everything works. Normally this should be fine. And so there's like one very common thing, because we want to also be able to debug something later. We can go here, and our debugger has to be connected to a different port or different interface, because in our Docker we have we are only listening for the local host for the interface in our container, and so we need a port mapping to receive all the requests from the other side. And so we have to call this to the default interface and port. And then we will also be able to debug it later with Docker Compose. So now we can save this here, and we can look if our Angular installation was also successful. And you can see it here. We have installed everything for Angular, so we can cd into our front end. And we can, for example, run ng-serve and just start our front end. And this will also take some time. And between this, we can also add here like a Docker file in our front end folder, where we then do all the stuff to run Angular later, also with Docker Compose then. You can see it here now. Angular is generating all our application bundles, and it's compiling the application. And you can see here in our source folder, we have our basic app component that is displaying some boilerplate stuff from Angular. So we would be able to access this in our browser. So we have to wait till everything here is compiled, and then we can go and start it, and then we can go to our browser and have a look at it, and then we can change everything. So while this, we can already go to local host 4200, and now we have to wait till this is finished. And then we are doing some nearly the same stuff here in our Dockerfile than we did in our other Dockerfile, because both are like Node.js, JavaScript stuff. So the commands are very familiar, as you've already seen in the CLIs. So you see now we have here a server listening on localhost 4200. We have compiled successfully, and now we can see, you can see here, this is the boilerplate stuff from Angular. And we can also go here into our component, delete everything, save it, and then you see it generated, or it's updating. And then you see we have now an empty page here. We can say h1 hello, and now you can see it here. This is like the same that we have in our backend with NestJS. So we can, for example, directly here in our app service not return hello world, but hello YouTube, and then this changes immediately. So you can see here, when this is started, our backend, we just have to wait a bit. And now it's here, and you can see if I refresh everything, we have our hello world. If I type in hello YouTube and save, then it's recompiling. And now if I hit reload, we see hello YouTube. So this works fine. So we have to stop this. And now we can start with our Angular Docker file. So this is like very much the same. So we also have here our first stage, like where we build everything. So we also want to use here Node in version 14. We want to name it development. We want to specify a working directory, and this time we can, for example, choose Thomas Frontend source app. Then we also want to copy our package JSON. So also the package log package JSON as the normal package JSON to our current directory or working directory where we are inside our Docker container. Then we want to run npm install. And we can also, for example, install inside our container the Angular CLI, so that we can use the ng-serve command later in our Docker compose file. And we just have to look, I'm not quite sure, Angular CLI in version 12. And this should install this inside our container. Then we can copy everything. And then we can install everything, or build everything. We want to expose our port to 4200. And then we have to do the same as before with Nest.js. We have to go into our package JSON, and for our ng run start command, we want to set it to a host. So we bind it to host 0.0.0.0 and to port 4200. Then we can save it. Now we are already set up to do or to combine everything with our Docker Compose file. So now we want to bring everything together in a simple, in a Docker Compose file. So we make a new file on the top or on the root of our project, and we name it Docker Compose.yaml. And then we have to do some stuff. So first we have to specify like the version. And this will be here 3.8. And then we have to define all our services that we are using. And we also have to name them. So this, for example, our first service is our API. So our Nest.js backend. And here we want to build something. So we want to build from our Docker file. And this is named Docker file. So you can see it in our API folder with our Docker file. It's named Docker file. And we want to specify like a context. And this is simply our API folder. So in our current directory, we go to the API folder. And then on the top of this folder, there is the Docker file. And here we want to target like a stage. So you remember we have here in our Docker file 2 stages, development and production. And in this case, we want to build the development stage, or we want to use the development stage. So when we make a comment here, only build development stage from Docker file. Then we have volumes. And here we have 2 volumes. First, we want to, our first volume is our API folder. And we want to bind this here. You see ./API, this is our folder here, to in our Docker Compose, in our Docker container, to Thomas source app. And as you remember, in our Docker file, Thomas source app is our working directory. And second, we want to also bind our Thomas source app node modules to a volume. Node modules. So we can say here as a comment, we mount our host directory to the Docker container. We mount current or mount API directory. This is the ./API to the Docker container, and this is then Thomas source app. And so we can reflect file changes from my host machine where I develop everything here from host to container. So later, if I run this Docker file here and everything starts up, and if I'm then changing something here, these file changes get reflected. We have this here because the volumes are mounted together to our Docker container, and then this compiles again, and here starts everything again, so that we don't have to restart everything hand by hand. Then we need like a command how we want to start. And this is simply named or set command, and then we say npm run, and we want to run the npm run start dev. So this is also specified in the package JSON from NestJS. And if we want to run in debug mode, then you have to change this here to npm run start debug, and also start your VS Code debugger. I also have there like a different second video, so I will link this in the description, and you can just have a look at this. And we can also say here run in dev mode, as we actually are doing, npm run start dev, and then we can say, for example, we have environment variables, environment. And these can be, for example, our database URL later, our node env. So we can also specify this here at the moment as development. We can say our port is 3000. And yeah, we can add some stuff here also later. And then last but not least, we have our ports. So we, for example, can go here from port 3000 to port 3000. And we have our debugging port. This is 9229, 9229. And yeah, let's first finish the front end here, and then I will just draw something that explains the port mapping a bit more. So first with our API service, now we have our front-end service. And here we also want to build from a Docker file. So we say we have our Docker file that is named Docker file, and we have context /frontend. Our command to start everything is npm run start. And here you have seen in our front-end Docker file, we also have like a named stage. So we can go to here, and we could also say, for example, here, how is it, target development. So our start command would then be npm run start. We can also bind to the volume so that our changes here on our machine where we are developing gets reflected to the Docker container. So in this case, here we want to bind the front-end folder or connect it or map it to our Thomas front-end source app, I think we named it. We have to look it up here, Thomas front-end source app. So to this folder here, just copy and paste so we don't make any errors here. And then we can also mount the node module so that we don't have to install it every time. So we say Thomas front-end source app node modules. Then we have, like before, port mapping, and this is also just 4200 to 4200. And I think in our API at the moment we have like port 3000 and 8080. We can just change this here also to 3000 so that we are even. Yeah, and here we also want to access later our API, so we have to link it. So you can see if we say here links, we link to another container and another service. So we can then use the service name as alias later in our proxy for our Angular front end, and then this is able to get data from our backend. So we can just say we links, and we link to our service name. This is API here. Then we have like our Postgres database that we want to use because we want to connect to it with our NestJS backend. So we use the Postgres image from Docker Hub. For example, in version 10.4, I think this is one of the latest. And here we have to specify some environment variables that are predefined by Docker, by Postgres image. So the first one is Postgres user. We can just name it user. We have the Postgres password. So these are like the credentials that we later use to access the database. Then we have also the Postgres database. We can just name this DB. And then we have another ports, and this is normally running on port 5432. And we can just say, for example, we want to access it from the outer side from port 35,000. And this maps to the inner port in container to 5432. And for example, if we want to access the Postgres database from browser, we could install Postgres adminer, and herefore we use the image page, I think, at pg-admin 4. .8, and here we can also say depends on, and we depend on the Postgres service. So this here has to be started before. We also have some environment variables, and these are also predefined, so you can also always go to Docker Hub, go pg-admin, and you have here the pg-admin 4. And I think there's like also like a new version out. And you can see here, these are like the default environment variables, pg-admin default, password, and so on. So for us, we just need a pg-admin default email so that we can log in. We say admin@admin.com. And then we have a pg-admin default password. And we can also just name this password. And then we have like another ports mapping. And here we can say this is reachable with port 5050, and inside it's port 80. This is like the basic Postgres admin port, and then we can access this later with the browser. And now we have to add some stuff here to our frontend and our NestJS backend, because we want to connect with our NestJS backend to our Postgres database also. So we need like here an environment variable in our API service. And we can just name this database URL. And here we access our Postgres service. Then we have our credentials. So the user that we entered here, the user, the password, and the database. So we say we have user, we want to log in with the password, add the Postgres on port 5432 against the database DB. And here you can see, since this Node.js or this NestJS API is running inside our container, we are trying to access the database from port 5432, so on this port here, that is just inside the container. If we want to exit it from our host machine here, we are on port 35,000. And because this maps this port here, the public port that we can access, to the inner port inside the container. And then we can also say that this API service here also depends on the database service. So we depend on our Postgres service. And then we could, for example, now try to start everything up. So let's see if we now cd into our normal folder here, and then we can just say docker compose up and see if everything works. So you can see here our docker compose file is invalid. Because what have we done here? Our environment Postgres p3 default email. So this should be like a string. So let's try again. So services API build contains unsupported option command. I am too false nested, so this has to go here. This has to go here. This has to go here, and this has to go here. Now everything, let's see. So mapping values are not allowed here. So let's go to line 19. So we have to do this. So this looks better. So now we're downloading all the images that we need. We have to wait a bit, and then we can try to access everything. While this is running, we can have a quick look at our story. So we can close this here, we can have a look at this. And we can see here our story. At the moment we have set up Angular, we have set up NestJS. We hopefully can start both with the Docker Compose file and Docker file and access it via the browser, so that is what we have to check now. And then when this is working, we have to make sure that we can connect with NestJS to the database. And for this we then have to use or connect, or can use type ORM, and then we can very simple install the dependencies that we need, and just in our root module here in NestJS can specify the connection. And here for the connection we can then use our environment variable that we specified here in the Docker Compose file, the database URL for the API for our NestJS service that should be able to connect to the database. And then at the end, in our story, you remember we wanted to display value with Angular that we get from the NestJS backend. And as we have seen here, we linked our front end to our API. So we have named it here API to our API here. And so then in our Angular service, we can just make like a request against API slash, it's then probably slash API. Because, yeah, we, oh no, it's just API on port 3000, and then we can access our NestJS backend. And so you can see it here. Let's see where we are with our Docker Compose. We have download much, maybe also the Node 14. We have, I think, the Postgres database. This will take quite some time. So you can see here we are in like, I think, step 5 of 10. So halfway done. Let's wait a bit. So now we can see we have built everything. So we have here our service, our API. So you see our Nest commands are all started. We have our Postgres database. We have our Postgres adminer. We have our front end running. And now we can try to access this here. So you see here is nothing running. We are just here in our Docker container. So we can, for example, go against our localhost 4200. You see this is the h1 hello tag that we have here. So we can go for this and we save it, and you see it's compiling. And now we have hello AO, and we can save it again. And we should also be able to access our API on localhost 3000. So we have here our hello YouTube, and we can also go into our API, into our service, and change this to, and then save it. And then you see we have the file change detected, and we build it again. We reload, and then we have YouTube AAAAA. So now we want to be able to connect from our front end to our backend, so to get some data. So first let's fix this here up again. Hello YouTube. And to work later, we can also make this to, like, we want to return an object, and then we say we have here, like, the title is hello YouTube, and then we are able to access this with Angular very easily. And what we can also do is we can go to our source from our backend to our main file, and we can, for example, say app.set global prefix and prefix our API. So we have here type app service is returning something else. So of course here we now return also an object. So now when we go to localhost 3000, there should not be an answer. So you see we have here not found. But if we go to /API, because we prefixed it, we have our title hello YouTube like before. Because we have here like get request on the base controller that is listening on the base path. So now we want to access this with from our front end. So for this we have to go into our front end. We have to make like a proxy conf file, proxy.conf.json. And here we can say we want to prefix everything that is going against /API to a target that is HTTP. Then we name it API on port 3000, and this API here, this is the link from our Docker Compose file from our front end to our API. So we named it like this, and this is our service named like this. So we access it like this also. This route is not, or this is not secure, so this is set to false. And we want to change origin because we're coming from 4200 to true. And then we have to say Angular where it finds this stuff. So we have to go to our, where is it? Angular.json. And where we build everything. So we see front end. Where are we? Let's search for it. Build. So we have here the ng serve, and then for let's say for development we want to have a proxy config, and this is source proxy.conf.json. So it's our source folder, our proxy.conf.json file. Then we can just save it. And here we, our default configuration is development. So we save it. And then we can generate, for example, a service in our front end. So we cd into our front end. We can use our Angular CLI. Or we can first create a folder. Let's name it services. We cd into our source, cd into our app, cd into our services folder, and here we can use the Angular CLI. We can say ng generate s for service. Let's say we want to generate a test service into our services folder, and now you see we have here our test service. We can also make a new folder, test service, and move the service to here. 1 second, my computer is a bit slow. So inside this here, we want to move it. Yeah, sorry, now I stopped my Docker Compose. That was not what I wanted to do. So we can start this again. And then in our constructor and our service, we want to have the HTTP client from Angular to make a request against our backend. So normally we should be able to import this. HTTP client. Okay, so we want to import the HTTP client from Angular. And now that's the question, where is it? Is it in core? Angular HTTP. Let's Google it. Angular HTTP client import. So we imported from Angular common HTTP. And client module, HTTP client. Of course, probably we will need first in our module HTTP client module, and then this should work. So then in our service, we want to have a basic function where we just get, let's name it test. We want to return an observable. We could also specify a type, so we can say our interface. So we say export interface title string. And then we name this like, let's name it test. And then we can say we want to return observable from test. And we just say return this.http. So we make then a GET request. We want to get in return something from interface test. And here we just go against API. And then our proxy conf should pick this up and return the value. And then we can access this in our app component. We then need our constructor. Here we call it private, for example, service, test service. And then we could say we have like test value that is from type observable test. We can import this, and this is just the service dot get test. And then we can, in our app component, very simply say we have here our test values. Sorry, my computer is a bit slow today. So this value here. And then we can subscribe with the async pipe to it. So this is automatically doing like subscribing to the observable. So when it gets hot and we display the value. So this is like the idea. Let's see if this works. So when we now go to our local host 4200, you can see first we have our hello, that is from this here, and then with our test value that we get from our API, the hello YouTube. So for example, if I now just go to my API, I change in my service, we return, let's say, hello Twitch. We save, when this recompiles. Give it some moment. And when we then reload everything, you see we have here hello Twitch in our front end. This is because we access our front end, gets the data from our backend. So I probably think this is like nearly all, but we can now check our story and see if we missed anything. So here we have set up Angular, NestJS, Docker Compose file. We want to access our Postgres database. So for this, let's just stop Docker, so that my PC has a bit more power. And we go into a new terminal. Then we go into our API folder. And then we need to install everything for our database. So we can just copy this here. And here they install the NestJS type-ORM and type-ORM package and the MySQL, but we are using Postgres, so we use the Postgres database package. So we say pg for the Postgres package. This is how it's named in NPM, so this should work. So we install this. And then we can go into our API, we can go into our app.module, and we have to add this to the imports. And we also think I need the config module, NestJS config. And have to add this also. Let's just make another terminal, cd into our API, and install the NestJS config. And then we say config module.for root. And we want to use it globally. So we set this also to true. And this is what you can just find here in the documentation, for example. And because we're a little bit faster than this here, we can use the import from here. This should be resolved later. And then the second one that we need is the type ORM module. So this is already in use, so we have to wait till this here is finished. So now we can run again. So then we have our type ORM module. So this is already working. We also are here for root. And then we can pass in some like options that we want to use. So obviously we want to connect against the Postgres database. So we use Postgres from type. We have like a URL, and this is the one that we have specified in our Docker Compose file, so we can access it in our API. So this is the database URL here. So we can say process.env, and then we name it. We can say we want to autoload entities, and we want to synchronize true. And then we could try to build again our services, Docker Compose. And we can also try, since you remember, we have like, let's close this here. We have like our database and we have Postgres adminer. This is listening to localhost 5050 and inner container is 80. So we can, for example, just make like a quick drawing. Basically, we have, for example, let's see if this works. Or if you can, yeah, if it's good, if I draw it here, yeah, probably. Let's see if this works. If you can see anything, if not, so basically we have here our container. So this is our container or Docker. And then we have here our API, so the nest.js stuff. And this is listening to port 3000. And this here is, for example, outside is our host machine. And we can then connect to it to also with port 3000 to our nest.js. We can, with 4200, connect to Angular, because we map this also to the port 4200. And as you remember, this gets some data from our nest.js API, and this connects to our Postgres database. And now I have to look it up what port we were using here. So we see for Postgres we have port 5432. So this here has 5432. And we also have like the Postgres admin. And this is, for example, this is like a better example than the other ones, because we have it listening here inside our container or inside Docker for port 80. And in our host, we mapped this port to port 5050. And then we can access with this port here our pg admin and connect then to our Postgres database and run queries against it. So now we have started it here, and we can see if nest.js said that it connected to the database. So probably we are having here an issue. So we have to build the stuff again, I think. So we can see it here now after restarting Docker Compose or Docker Compose build. Also our nest.js is running successfully. And we have here type ORM module, we have dependencies initialized, config app module, config module, type ORM core module, app controller installed everything, our frontend is running. So now we can have, for example, a look inside the B3 admin. So we can go for localhost 5050. Yes. And then we can use the stuff that we specified here for Docker for the Postgres adminer. So we have admin and password. We can log in. Then we can add like a new database server. Let's name it database. We have to add a connection. So this is, I think, Postgres. So how we named it here. We want port 5432 is the inside port inside our Docker. Our database is the DB. Our username are user and password. User, password. Let's try to connect. Now we see we have here our database, DB, and we could do something with it, or see later if when we do something with NestJS, we can run queries against it. So I think this should be all for this video here. And now we can check the stories. And we see we have set up Angular correctly. We have set up NestJS. We have, we are able to start Angular with Docker and Docker Compose, and we can access it in the browser. What is this? The same goes for our NestJS API. We can connect to our Postgres database with NestJS, and we are displaying a value that we get from our NestJS backend in our front end. So this is like the first stuff that we need. And now we can commit everything. So we may say git add -a. And then we say git commit -message. Then we prefix this with video 1 and say set up Angular and NestJS with Docker file and Docker Compose, get data in front end from back end, and connect to database. So we can then git push this, and this can, already done. So for this time,